Hello, everybody. I am really super excited to say that I am joined today by a very, very special guest, Elliot Mason of Masons and Sons. Now, these guys make the most incredible suits that you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about when I give you a little reminder of where they've come from. But I'm also really proud and honored to say that Mason and Sons have very kindly sponsored us this year. And so I've invited Elliot Mason of Mason and Sons, on today to tell you a little bit about his fantastic suits and also just talk about, sponsoring Cue the Music. So welcome, Elliot. And please, let's start by talking about the history of these Bond suits, going back to the famous Anthony Sinclair and how they come to be part of your company now.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me along, Warren. Yes, we've been running Anthony Sinclair since 2012. It was the 50th anniversary of the Bond franchise. Skyfall came out that year, and Daniel Craig, or James Bond, and the Queen jumped out of a helicopter at the Olympics opening ceremony. So if there was ever a year to relaunch Anthony Sinclair as a tailoring business, it was then. It was it was almost by chance how we came across. We were aware, of course, that Anthony had made the suits for Sean Connery, but we had no idea that an acquaintance of my father was Anthony's apprentice and actually still had the rights to trade under that name.
Wow.
The gentleman was called Richard Payne, and when Anthony retired from tailoring due to a stroke, he handed the keys to his shop and his shares down to his apprentice Richard, who carried on making suits with the Anthony Sinclair label in for a number of years, and then he decided to put his own name in the suits that he was making for his customers, and he moved on from the shop on Conduit Street and carried on working in the trade, but for himself and other tailors. So the sort of legend of Anthony Sinclair sort of faded away slightly, and really it was the sort of early 2000s when the Bond blogs all started and people were talking about who made these suits for the original James Bond, and it was a chance conversation my father was having with a group of tailors, and one of them said that Richard owns that brand, and we managed to convince him to relaunch it with us. And it was perfectly timed, again, by accident, I suppose. But the Barbican Museum were launching an exhibition that was going around the world celebrating sort of 007 design. And Eon Productions and the people at the Barbican wanted us to recreate the midnight blue dinner suit, the first thing you ever see James Bond wearing, and arguably the most famous suit in the world, the Goldfinger suit. And they asked us to recreate those, and they had mannequins that were the same size as Connery was back in the early 1960s. And very fortunately, a customer of ours had acquired one of the few existing original Connery suits from the films, and it was a grey herringbone suit from You Only Live Twice. And
Wow.
Richard was able to backdraft a pattern from this suit to recreate the Midnight Blue dinner suit and the Goldfinger suit for the exhibition. So with that, we were off, and I can't believe 2 years ago we were celebrating the 60th anniversary
Yeah.
of the Bond film. So it's been an adventure, and the time has really flown.
So just to sort of really put it in a box here, what we're talking about here is that Anthony Sinclair actually designed all of Sean Connery's suits. I think I'm right in saying in the official James Bond films, from Dr. No right up to Diamonds Are Forever, they were all Anthony Sinclair suits. Wasn't that the case?
That's absolutely right. And bizarrely, George Lazenby, when he went for his audition for the role, found out that there was some marketing. It's not like it is today, but in terms of the amount of marketing that there is with brands and the franchise. But Lazenby found out that Connery went to Sinclair for the suit, or rather was taken to Sinclair for his suits. So George Lazenby went to Anthony Sinclair, and I'm not quite sure if he purchased a suit, borrowed a suit. It was a suit that was made as an extra that wasn't used, but he went to his audition wearing an Anthony Sinclair suit, and well, the rest is history with that one. So we do like to tell people that if they're coming here for an interview suit, then they've got a good chance of getting the job.
Well, of course, that was one of the sort of really famous stories, and actually, you won't be aware of this, but we actually have that story in our script. I mean, I didn't realise actually that he'd actually got it from Anthony Sinclair. But of course, the other famous story that everybody knows, or I think it's quite well known, was that Terence Young took Sean Connery there, wasn't it? He was somebody that wore Anthony Sinclair suits, and he took Sean Connery, didn't he, to get, and that's how it ended up being Anthony Sinclair's suits throughout those films.
Yes, and the legend also goes that Terence Young encouraged Connery to sleep in his suits that he got used to them. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a good story anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a bit about yourself then before we talk a bit more about the suits. I mean, are you a big Bond fan? And if you are, have you got a favourite film, a favourite actor?
Yeah, well, I'm a Bond fan by birth, I suppose. I don't think I was given a choice. I grew up watching the old films with my dad, and then sort of as I got a little bit older, I sort of grew up, I suppose, in that Brosnan era. So I love those Pierce Brosnan films, but just
I did as well, yeah. And I think he was really underrated, wasn't he?
I think so, and I think for a 10, 11, 12-year-old boy, it's just perfect, and you can sort of the jokes and things that you may have been lost on you in those older films. There isn't quite as much of that, and it's more a bit more action packed. But my heart really is with the older movies, especially with Connery and Moore. And in the last few years, unfortunately, we never got to meet Sean Connery, but one of my father's prized possessions is a voicemail message that he received from Sean Connery probably about 10 years ago now. And he called my father because he wanted to purchase a Goldfinger suit for I think it was his stepson. So we were able to make a Goldfinger suit for his stepson. And then in the last few years of his life, Roger Moore was a customer, and he used to come and visit us here in Montague Square, and he was an absolute darling, and very, very nice gentleman. And then we've also made a dinner suit for George Lazenby several years ago. So we would very much like to get our tape measure around Timothy Dalton so that we can get the next Bond. But growing up, really, it's for me, you can't beat the original, and Sean Connery certainly my favourite Bond. And it probably doesn't surprise you that my favourite Connery film is Goldfinger.
Yeah, me too, I have to say. And actually, there's just so many iconic things within that film. And as you said earlier, that suit is really one of the most iconic suits, well, from films ever, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure that you get told that all the time, and I'm sure it's something that you say. I can't think of anything that comes close to it, apart from maybe the Dr. No one, which is also one of yours as well.
Yes, we it's certainly both got to have be in the top 5. The other suit that we have actually recreated for a few customers, we didn't create the original, but have made suits that are inspired by the original, and is often sort of in a lot of these lists, it's either the Goldfinger suit or the Cary Grant North by Northwest suit, which are the two. One list will say it's the Goldfinger, and the second will be the Cary Grant one. So I think I consider ourselves very lucky that we've got a few of those suits in those lists. But for me, even for the Goldfinger suit, unfortunately, my complexion doesn't lend itself to a light grey suit. I wish I could wear it, but even though I probably couldn't pull it off myself. I just think it's a phenomenal garment.
It really is. It really, really is. Uh, I'd like to talk a bit more about it actually in a minute and how it sort of ties in with people watching. But before I do, I also have to ask you if you have a favourite Bond song, especially being Cue the Music and being the concert. And I know you're coming to our O2 show in a few weeks, which I'm really excited for you to
Yeah,
come and
can't wait.
see. So have you got a song that sort of really is the one that is your go-to listen to, or anything in particular that stands out?
Um, I think in terms of a sort of big Bond anthem, again, I'm going to bore you and say it's probably Goldfinger. And then on a more uh, slightly more sentimental choice is probably Nobody Does It Better. And then I can't not mention to you Live and Let Die, written
Yes,
by Paul
absolutely.
McCartney, because I'm actually calling you from his old living room. So our address in London, where we see customers for our tailoring appointments, is 34 Montague Square. And this apartment was owned by Ringo Starr in the 1960s. And he sublet it to Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, and Paul McCartney used it as a demo studio. And in the basement here, he did early recordings of Eleanor Rigby. So unfortunately, it was before the Live and Let Die
Yeah,
times. But there is a fantastic connection between, Anthony Sinclair and the Beatles.
yeah,
But more than that, just the Beatles and Bond, because Doctor No was premiered in the UK on October 5th, 1962,
yeah.
which I believe is the exact same day in history that the Beatles released their first ever single, Love Me Do. So the
Right.
fact that two of the biggest, for want of a better phrase, brands, the Beatles and Bond, were born on the same day is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And we'd been here for a couple of years, and one of our customers, who's a big Bond fan, pointed out that on the other side of the square here, Ian Fleming used to have an apartment that he lived in when he was demobbed. So there's even more of a connection, which is, we've been here for 10 years or even longer, actually 11 years, I think now. And so often we forget what a phenomenal place it is.
Absolutely, and definitely somewhere to come and visit. And if someone is watching and thinking about ordering a suit and would be interested in maybe getting all authentically dressed up as James Bond, we're going to come on to that in a second. But I actually have to say that I already know that at least two huge Cue the Music supporters have already done that in advance. Let's talk a little bit about that, because being the 60th anniversary year of Goldfinger, and we've talking about that iconic suit, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be the Goldfinger suit, because you do a whole range of suits on your websites from the Bond films. But if anybody's watching and they're sort of thinking, do you know what? I would love to really dress up and look and feel like Bond. And maybe if you're a partner watching and you think, what would be the absolutely killer present for my partner? Something that is so unique as a gift that you couldn't even dream of it, probably, actually. That I think this is sort of the perfect idea. So tell me a little bit about the process. If somebody wanted to have their own bespoke James Bond suit fitted to them to purchase from you, how would they go about that process? And tell me a bit more about that.
Certainly. So we offer both bespoke and made to measure tailoring. Bespoke is the thing we've been doing for the longest, but made to measure is by far where the majority of our business is now, because a bespoke suit takes quite a few months to make. It involves several fittings and is several £1,000s. So most of our orders come from our made to measure business, and whether a customer wants bespoke or made to measure, they get in touch to make an appointment, because as you can probably tell, Montague Square is not a typical shop. We see people by appointment as a showroom setup. And when customers come in, often because they've seen suits on our website, they may well have something very specific, like they want the Goldfinger suit or the Midnight Blue dinner suit. And as you have mentioned, we do all sorts of other things. So it's not just recreations of the original suits we made for the franchise. We've got the ability to make absolutely anything for people, and more modern cuts as well. So a lot of the Bond suits that you see on the website, they have quite high-waisted trousers with double pleats, and those are really on there because those were the style specifications of the original. But plenty of people order things from us that are slightly slimmer or don't have pleats on them, or double-breasted jackets like I'm wearing, which Connery never wore. So we have a lot of flexibility. But
Yeah.
when customers come in for that initial appointment, we spend usually about an hour or so, first of all, having a cup of tea or coffee with them, and then we will discuss what it is they're looking for, if they have something specific in mind, or if they'd like us to sort of help guide them through the process. And this can be anything from dinner suits to Scottish Highland wear, separate jackets and trousers. We sort of say from beach to boardroom and everything in between. We can probably sort you out. And then we have a shirt making business as well, of course, and an outerwear business. So at that initial meeting, we will discuss the garment the customer would like. We've got tens of thousands of fabrics to choose from. We don't force people to sit through and look at all of them. We help them narrow that down a bit. And then we go through the process of taking measurements and using our master garments and samples to assess fit. And we like it when a customer can actually try a jacket on before they leave. So at that first experience, we'll get them often a jacket and trousers in a size that is closest to their own, to give them a real good feel of what to expect. And with the made to measure, it takes typically around 5 to 6 weeks to make a suit. We ask customers to then come back for a second fitting so we can make sure that everything's okay, or if we need to make any minor alterations. And then we're away. And in the UK, we see customers in London by appointment. In the US, we've got a permanent presence in Houston, Texas, and recently in Miami, Florida, and particularly in the US. Every month we're traveling around on trunk shows, so very often customers don't travel to Houston or Miami, but we go all over the show, and we are regularly on the road.
Excellent. I mean, it sounds very much like this is an experience. I mean, it goes without saying, and I'm sure that you'll double down on everything you just said, but it sounds like just the ultimate kind of treat, actually, whether it's for yourself or for someone as a gift. You know, this is much more than just buying, clothing at a run of the mill. This is the whole thing around it. Sounds like you turn it into a real sort of lifetime experience, something that, if you're somebody like me that's maybe not able to afford to do this regularly, if it's a one-off thing, then I think it's something that you will remember forever. And I think it very much sounds like that's something that you really feed into.
Absolutely, because we make a lot of suits, be it lounge suits or dinner suits or linen suits, whatever it might be, for weddings, and very often this will be a once in a lifetime experience for a customer, and it's their wedding day and they want to really treat themselves. And as you said, we operate out of homes. We're a family business. We don't have stores. It's a one-on-one appointment with the customer as they get our undivided attention, and it's a great way to sort of build a relationship with the customer as well. And often people come in for half an hour and we've been chatting for 45 minutes, and then someone reminds, or one of us will remind the other that we're here to conduct some business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at your website. There are a number of different Bond suits from across the Sean Connery era in particular. Tell us a little bit about some of the options. I mean, I think it's quite a few, isn't there? But I mean, tell us a bit about the options that people might have if they're thinking about going for a particular suit. Maybe it's not just the Goldfinger one or the Midnight Blue Doctor No one that they're really interested in. And you've got lots of other options. And also, if you've got a particular favourite at all.
Yeah, the 60th anniversary 2 years ago now, which is rather scary to think about, but 2 years ago, in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the franchise, we did a 60-piece collection recreating all of the items of clothing that Connery wore that was made by Sinclair. The vast majority, anyway. There was a few things that we didn't make. So the tailoring section on our website is effectively a catalogue of those original suits, and we made them and had some help from some people in the Bond suits community in trying to work out which fabric is closest to the original. Because the amazing thing about the Goldfinger suit, and I should mention that with the 60-piece collection, we collaborated with a fabric mill called Holland and Sherry, a British mill that's hundreds of years old. And
Right.
Sinclair used Holland and Sherry when he was running his business. And when we were given or loaned, I should say, the You Only Live Twice suit, we took it to Holland and Sherry and we pulled out some of their bunches. And unbelievably, they still make the exact same fabric that
Wow.
Connery had his suits made in. And even better, they still make the Glen check that the Goldfinger suit was made in. So it was a no-brainer for us to collaborate with them for that 60-piece collection. So the difficulty often with having movie stills or just pressing pause on the TV to try and get the right fabric references, the colouring can change. So there's in some of the suit we had a dozen pictures of the same suit from different references, or rather different media, and trying to decide which colour was probably the right one was a bit of a challenge with a few things. So it was an educated guess with a few different pieces, and some customers have actually found fabrics that they believe is closer, and we'll always take a look at that as well, so that we always striving for perfection where we can. But the other great thing is, as I mentioned about the pleats, for example, so some people don't like wearing pleats or they think it's quite old-fashioned. The great thing is, because everything we make is custom or made to order, if a customer likes one of the suits but they don't like one of the details, we can change that for them. And so you can have a suit that is inspired by the original but completely styled in the way that you like.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. So it gives you sort of real flexibility to have one foot in the past and one foot in how, what works for you. I think that's great.
Yeah, it's I think for some people they might think it's too much like fancy dress, replicating a suit, but we give customers complete freedom in the sense that you can effectively recreate it in your own vein.
Yeah, so I think that's absolutely perfect, because I think what we have to remember is that maybe people watching this might have a different idea of what they want this suit for. I mean, you're going to have the absolute Bond geeks like me that when I go to a Bond event, I want it to really feel and look like I am paying homage to that original suit, whichever one it is. But then also the people maybe just want to have a little bit of a twist on it and maybe wear it for sort of more, day-to-day occasions when they're out with family events and stuff. And so I think the fact that you can do that is brilliant, because it will give people watching the flexibility.
Yeah, some customers may just want a subtle nod to the fact that it was a Bond suit.
Did you mention your favourite? I don't think you did. Did we talk about if you got a favourite one?
Well, my favourite suit, so when we recreated or launched the collection, I should say. My father and I and our colleague Ryan, who's based in America, we each treated ourselves to a new suit from the collection. And my father went for a chalk stripe grey flannel suit that Connery wore, I think, in M's office, off the top of my head. And Ryan opted for the Goldfinger suit. The grey contrast check suit, and I always loved the brown houndstooth flannel suit with a contrast vest that Connery wore, also visiting M's office, partly because it was a bit, people would say, well, you're not supposed to wear brown in town, so I liked the fact that it broke these sacred rules, and it was just quite different from a lot of the other suits that he wore, so that I opted for that one. So I'm fortunate that I have one of those in my wardrobe.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today, and I would just like to sort of double up and say, well, actually you can say it for people watching that are getting all excited about possibly having a James Bond suit, or even just a suit made. Where can they sort of find out some more information about yourselves? If you've got a website, obviously, I know.
Absolutely, they can find out more information on anthonysinclair.com, which is the dedicated website for that brand, and then our sort of parent website, for want of a better phrase, is masonandsons.com, which has, if you're interested in James Bond stuff, and well, I suppose that if our tagline on Mason and Sons is what to buy for the man who has everything. So if you're into cars, watches, clothing, motorcycles, we've got lots of interesting things on there.
And I guess a company like yourselves are always thinking ahead, and I'm sure you've got things in the pipeline that you can't speak about. But is this it for you now? Or are you going to be innovating and coming out with new ideas, and maybe new things looking backwards and new things looking forwards? Have you got more things coming with the James Bond twist, do you think?
We've got quite a few things in the pipeline for the Thunderball anniversary next year. And I will leave it at that.
Wow. Okay. One of my favorite, actually, probably, I know I said earlier Goldfinger is my favorite Sean Connery, but my three favorite all-time Bond films jostle between Goldfinger, Thunderball, and Casino Royale. Depending on what mood I'm in and how often I've watched them recently, they can sort of swap for first place. I absolutely love Thunderball, and the music in Thunderball in particular is absolutely incredible. So that one really does interest me. I can't wait to see what you've got lined up for that. But Elliot, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone's enjoyed watching it. And just a huge thank you from myself and everyone at Cue the Music and everyone watching for the incredible support that you give us, not only this year actually, but several years ago. You sponsored us then as well. So we're really privileged and honoured to have someone such as yourselves supporting our show, and I think everyone will look forward to seeing you at the O2, and if you do see Elliot at the show, do go up and say hello and chat to him about these incredible suits.
Oh, thanks, Warren. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you again for inviting me along to chat.
Pleasure. Thank you.